Welcome to Study Isaiah, the podcast where we examine the language, context, and meaning of the book of Isaiah with Dr. Paul Wegner. I'm Tyler Sanders, and across from me is Paul Wegner, who's going to tell us the Hebrew word of the day.
Oh, yes. And this time I did just do one word for you. It's the word holy. And we're gonna see this in chapter 6 a lot. And it's going to be crucial to the whole book because do you remember that title, The Holy One of Israel, that occurs about 25 times?
Yeah.
It becomes crucial to Isaiah because I think it just changes his life. I mean, it's that so important to him. But the word means, we know it means holy, but it also means set apart unto God. And that's why I think that could be a really important thing for them. So it's stuff that, because they're so holy, they're actually set apart to God. And when you get to chapter 6.
Set apart to God, what does the to in there mean?
Well,
set apart, reserved
to be used
for
to
God,
Him
kinda?
and for Him, yeah.
It's related to. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and chapter 6 will be real clear when God comes to him, or when God says, "Well, who am I? Who will I go? Who will go, and who should I send? And who will go for us, and who shall I send?" And Isaiah says, "Here am I, send me." Mm-hmm. And so it's that part, I think, that really it's not just that he's holy, but now he's being used by God because he is holy. Yeah. And I think that's important.
Okay.
So that's our word for today.
How do you pronounce it?
Kadosh.
That's what I thought.
Yeah. And then in chapter 6:3 is the important one. And one called out, and he's talking about these seraphim. And one called out to the other and said, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory." So that's where it really, in Hebrew, if you say something twice, it's for emphasis. If you say it for 3 times, that's like the epitome of holiness. So it's really important that it is actually repeated that many times.
Yeah, right.
So, okay, so that's our word for today.
That's great. Yeah. I'm excited to get into this today.
Good.
This is a great chapter in Isaiah. This is probably one I would imagine a lot of people are more familiar with this chapter probably than anything
else. Of chapter
else.
6,
chapter 6. So last episode we talked about the songs.
Yes.
Right? The beginning of Chapter 5 and Chapter 12, all of Chapter 12, and that would be the Song of the Vineyard and the Song of Thanksgiving.
Yep.
Yeah.
And what's the difference between them?
They're in different places in Isaiah. The difference, Song of Vineyard is pretty dark. Things are getting bad, and that's kind of where we get the metaphor that this vineyard's been built, and then we're going to let it. The owner is going to let it go to pieces, basically, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not producing good fruit.
Good.
So that it should be producing good fruit.
Exactly.
It was fertile ground, everything.
I mean, if you look at it, the owner did everything they could.
Yeah.
Remember we talked about, and he even put in
the wine press.
Wine press.
The wine vat.
I think it's
But he built it up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then so that shows you. Israel had everything, that God had given them all the blessings and everything like that. And it turned out that they were sour grapes, worthless grapes.
Right.
And then chapter 12 is the answer to that, how they're praising God for restoring them and making them a useful nation again and a good vineyard.
Yeah.
So it doesn't use the word vineyard there, but it talks about how God restored them and all.
Yeah. So we covered those two, and then we covered further inside the Palistrophe, right?
Okay, and there were 6 woe oracles, remember that?
Yes, 6 woe oracles on one side and 1 on the back side.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And then on the woe oracles, or the 6 of them, if you remember, those were all talking about what Israel was like.
Yeah.
Then we get to chapter 10, and it's talking about the woe oracles to Assyria.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Good.
Mm-hmm. So the next thing we're going to get into is the uplifted hand oracles. And we have 5, I guess, really, but 2 sections.
Yeah.
One kind of in more the beginning half of the section, and 4 in the end of this kind of, or closer to the end of the section.
Yeah.
And then we're getting to the center of this Palistrophe, the most important part. And we won't do the whole thing today, but we'll do the first chapter, right, which is Isaiah's vision. We're getting into his vision, right?
Yeah. And his calling, I call it calling commission.
Oh, yeah.
Because remember, that's the first thing was his vision, and then he responds to it.
Yeah, the response.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Well, maybe we should figure out what exactly an uplifted hand oracle is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why don't we go to chapter 5, verse 25?
Okay, 25.
This one is interesting because it's kind of in the middle of the Woe Oracle, because it goes from 24 all the way to 30, and usually they're at the end of it. But this one it looks like it's in the middle, and I think the reason is because he's still gonna what an uplifted hand oracle is it sounds like God has already poured out punishment already, and the nation hasn't got it. So he's got his hand uplifted again, ready to come down and spank him again.
Okay.
and this was interesting because it sounds like in 24, he has already poured out some judgment on them. But then when you get to 26, he's actually going to call for a distant nation. Remember that? And that's going to be Assyria to come. So I think what it is in the heart of this one, it's got two of the judgments that are happening. So when the first one, he pours out some judgment, then he's got to that place where he's got his hand lifted up, ready to come down again, and then he brings the Assyrians.
Okay.
So I think that's the reason why it's in the middle this time, because this one actually is what I would call a complete one. It's got the first part, then that uplifted hand oracle, and then comes through with the Assyrians again.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of what all of them are going to do. Only all the other ones are going to have that uplifted hand oracle part, that talking about the hand still uplifted at the end.
Okay.
Now, what's interesting in this, I can't find this kind of an oracle anywhere else. So it seems like it's only in the book of Isaiah, and it seems like, so it's unique to him.
Yeah.
And not only that, but it's kind of unique in how he realizes what God is doing. You know, he's bringing some punishment. If Israel would have turned around, I think God would have stopped, right? In chapter 1, remember, remember he says, I can't even find any more places to beat you anymore, because I've beaten you everywhere, from the top of your head to the sole of your foot. And there's no, it's all raw wounds and bruises and all that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's interesting in that it sounds like this is more of a thing for Isaiah and his understanding that God could stop it at any point, but Israel just keeps wandering on without listening to God and not obeying.
Yeah. And that's the theme.
Yeah.
That's what you title it, right?
That's right.
Your first slide.
Will
Will
they ever
Israel
obey?
obey? Yeah. So far, not much. Not often. Yeah.
All right, so let's see what it says. Okay. Therefore, as a tongue of fire consumes stubble and dry grass collapses into the flame, so their root will become like rot and their blossom blown away. For they have rejected the law of the Lord of hosts and despised the Holy One of Israel. Now, remember I told you about that term you're going to see.
Yeah.
Holy One of Israel, you're going to see over and over again.
Yeah.
Okay? On this account, the anger of the Lord is burned against his people. He has stretched out his hand against them and struck them down. So see, he's even helping you explain what an uplifted hand oracle is, it seems like. So he told us there, okay, and the mountains quaked and their corpses lay in like refuge in the middle of the streets. For all this, his anger is not spent, but his hand is still stretched out. Yeah. So that's actually, in my mind, this is the best explanation of what a uplifted hand oracle is, because he already told you. He says, I've struck them, and then they didn't get it.
The anger is not spent.
So I stretched out my hand again.
Yeah.
And then once you do there, now look at verse 26. He will also lift up a standard to a distant nation. He will whistle for it from the ends of the earth. Now we know that distant nation is Assyria.
Right.
So if this is historically understood, I mean, I'm pretty sure Isaiah has a pretty good history of understanding what's going on. So that would probably be like then the Syro-Ephraimite War, when the northern and southern, or the northern kingdom and Syria went against Judah. Yeah. So that would be the first part, and then now he's got the Assyrians coming. So so I think that helps us understand what those oracles are all about. Yeah,
you're kind of saying like this first swipe of the hand, I guess, was the Syro-Ephraimite War.
Like, I think so.
This is not like a general kind of things could be bad, or like this is a very specific reference, and there's another one coming, and that one is Assyria.
Yeah, and I might even say that Syro-Ephraimite wasn't the only thing, because God it says earlier that God had brought the Philistines against them, and Edom had come against them. But it was all in that time period of the Syro-Ephraimite War. So there's a bunch of things that he's doing, and Israel still doesn't seem to get it.
Yeah.
So then it's now the best picture of the Assyrians. Now remember, the Assyrians are the first nation that ever has a standing army. Now remember the difference. That means most nations, when there was a time of war, they just called their people. So they we call them a militia, where they'd bring their pitchforks and stuff like that, and that's what they used for a war.
Yeah.
The Assyrians had a special group of people all set aside
Yeah.
just for, this is the only thing they did. So I assume they trained all the time.
Right.
This is the only thing they did. Now, the picture of them is in these next couple of verses. So he's going to whistle for that distant nation. Now look at verse 27. No one in it is weary or stumbles, none slumbers or sleep, nor is the belt at its waist undone, nor is his sandal strap broken. Its arrows are sharp, all those bows are bent. The hoofs of his horses seem like flint, and its chariot wheels like a whirlwind. Its roaring is like a lioness, and it roars like a young lion's. It growls as it seizes the prey, and it carries them off with no one to deliver them. Now, that actually pictures Assyria really well. They were strong. They were quick.
Well equipped.
They knew what they were doing. Yeah. It sounds like if they had a sandal thong that was broken, they'd fix it before they ever went to war.
Right.
So everything is perfect. And then when it says, and it growls as it seizes a prey and carries it off with no one to deliver it.
Yeah.
Because there was no one more powerful than Assyria at this time, that pictures them really well.
And they would actually take people.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
Exactly.
literally. Yeah.
Yeah. Remember, they're the first ones, too, also to deport people.
Yeah.
So that fits them really well again.
Yeah.
Now look at verse 30. And it will growl over it in that day like the roaring of a sea. If one looks to the land, behold, there is darkness and distress. Even the light is darkened by the clouds. Now, that phrase is kind of interesting, those last two phrases, because we're going to see them again in chapter 8, where he talks about the land being dark and distress. And it's at that time it's the Syro-Ephraimite War, at least I think.
Yeah.
But remember, it probably has more and goes into the time the Assyrians come too.
Right.
So it's interesting. You'll see those again, those same kind of terms.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a fascinating one.
Okay, so that's the first one. And I think it's the most full because it actually explains what a uplifted hand oracle is.
And so when you said this is unique, it's unique to Isaiah? Is it unique to just these two instances as well?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, the closest one was that one in verse 25, but that seems like it's explaining what it is. So that was, but that phrase is his hand is stretched out and his hand is against them.
Yeah.
So that's how you know. Oh, interesting. That's what it means then.
To have your hand stretched out.
Yeah.
For God to have his hand.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to look at the four?
Yep.
Where are they?
So they are
9?
in chapter 9, yep. And now all the other ones are going to have that. For all of this, his hand is still stretched out. So they're going to have that phrase at the end. And the reason is because now he's going to punish. Then he's going to have that little statement. He's going to punish some more, then have that statement. Then he's going to have punish some more and have that statement. Yeah. And I remember that the key for this is, I think, is that God's given them a chance to repent and return from their ways. And if they don't, he can then bring
This
more.
is the next thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, should we look at them?
Yeah. Where are we going to start in chapter 9?
Verse 8.
Verse 8. Okay.
Yep. So here's what it says. The Lord sends a message against Jacob, and it falls on Israel, and all the people know it. Oh, he sends a message against Jacob. Remember, Jacob and Israel is the same people. So it's basically, it's coming and it's falling. Now he sends it, and it's going to fall on them. Gotcha. I always used to think that was two different nations, but it's not. So, yeah. Okay. All right. That is Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria. I should let you know this. The name Ephraim was going to pop up regularly, and that's because the northern kingdom, almost all that's left of them is the highlands of Ephraim, because the Syrians had, now remember, not Assyrians, the Syrians had basically taken over a lot of their land. Yeah. So around the all the way to the coast where there'd be several tribes there, and then Ephraim was basically right in the middle, that hill country, and that's pretty much all there is left of Israel.
Wow.
Okay.
So that's becoming the term
Yeah.
for the northern kingdom, essentially.
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And it's because that's all that's left.
That's really,
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that is Ephraim. I'm in verse 9. That is Ephraim and the inhabitants of Samaria, asserting in pride and arrogance of heart. The bricks have fallen down, but we will rebuild them with smooth stones. Let me just stop there. Do you see what that was happening? Now, first of all, he's already warned you. This is pride and arrogance. What would it mean, the bricks have fallen down and we will rebuild them with smooth stones?
To me, that sounds like bricks are a construction material designed to create buildings. Stones are using what you have available to rebuild.
Oh, I'm glad that I asked.
Oh, good.
Because bricks at that point would have been sun-baked bricks, so they would have been cheap.
Oh, so this is stone is a better material for building. I'm glad you told me that too.
Well, I'm actually glad we did that because that shows their pride and arrogance, right? Oh, we've been punished and our bricks have fallen down, but we're going to come back even stronger than ever.
Yep.
Okay, does that make sense? Now, the second one, the second one might make even more sense. The sycamores have been cut down, but we will replace them with cedars.
An even better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so that one probably is a little easier because the cedars of Lebanon are like the best building materials possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so I just thought it'd better make sure what they're saying.
No, that's good.
But it even told us. They say this in pride and arrogance. So that's how you knew. The idea is kind of going to show that.
What we're replacing is better than what we had.
Yeah. Okay. Therefore, therefore the Lord raises against them adversaries from Rezin. Now that's a little problem. The adversaries don't come from Rezin. They could be. Namely Rezin. I mean, he is going to be the adversary. He's going to come against Judah. So it's more adversaries from Rezin. They're not adversaries against Rezin. He's the one that's bringing them. Okay. Okay, and spurs their enemies on. The Arameans on the east and the Philistines on the west. So the Arameans, now remember, usually the Syrian, that's another name for Syria.
Okay.
They're in the north usually, but now that says they're coming around from the east. And they actually, in the history books, if you look at Second Kings, it actually shows you that they actually had already gone down and got their seaport, Ebion Gezer, down on the Red Sea, and they had already conquered that.
Wow.
So this, once again, historically, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So he's sending these against them, all right? And the Philistines are always on the west. I mean, that's where they live, okay? And they devour Israel with gaping jaws. And what that means is they're eating up the land so that now Israel controls even less and less, and that's why they're called Ephraim now, right? Because there's so little land left.
They've lost so much. Right.
Yep. In spite of all this, his anger does not turn away, and his hand is still stretched out. So what's that mean?
Well, God has brought all this stuff on. Yeah. His anger is still not sated.
Yeah, so there's still more.
Yeah, there's more coming.
Good. All right, look at verse 13. Yet the people do not turn back to him who struck them. So see, remember, that also helps you know that's probably the reason for these punishments is to get their attention in hopes that they'll turn back to God. And he's saying it's not working.
Yeah, it's already.
Okay. Yeah. Nor do they seek the Lord of hosts. For the Lord cuts off head and tail from Israel, both palm branch and bulrush in a single day. Now it's going to explain, it's using a picture first, and then it's going to explain it. Okay, the head is the elder and the honorable man. The prophet is who teaches falsehood is the tail. Now does that make sense? So here's a palm branch. It's going to be the big thing up on top. Yeah. So those would be like the leaders and stuff like that. And then the bulrushes are the low things. So it's got the contrast between the higher things and the lower things. Then it talks about the head of the horse and then the tail. But actually, I don't think it means tail. I think it means what's connected to the tail. In God's mind, the false prophets are the lowest of the low. Yeah. And that's because they're deceptive. They claim they're talking for God. In fact, they're doing their own messages or talking from, Satan even, really.
And that's what we're really seeing here is like the highest, most honorable people all the way to the very worst. Yeah. Everyone's going to get it.
And you notice it said in a single day. Yeah. So that, and even if that doesn't mean one day, it sure means in quick succession. So he's going to remove all of them. And in actual fact, in the northern kingdom, it did happen really quick. Sennacherib comes down, wipes out, actually it's Sargon, comes down and wipes out Samaria. And it took him about 3 years, or 2 years, but at the end, it fell really quick.
Yeah.
So it's just a fast thing.
Yeah.
All right, so the head is the elder and honorable man, the prophet who teaches falsehood is the tail. For those who guide these people lead them astray, and those who are guided by them are brought to confusion. So the leaders are leading them astray, and the people are just following it. You know, so they don't know what's going on. Therefore, the Lord does not take pleasure in their young men, nor have pity on their orphans or widows. Now, that's got to be a shocking statement, right? Because God always takes care of the orphans and widows.
Right.
This must be telling you they're so corrupt that even the orphans and widows aren't listening.
Right.
Okay? So
Right.
you very rarely see that. This is like one of the few times you'll see in the Old Testament where God's not taking care of the orphans and widows.
Well, let me ask you something here, because
Sure.
what was interesting in 16, you know, we got back. I mean, this idea has shown up before that the leaders are corrupt.
Yes.
We've already seen that, you know, previously.
Yeah.
Whenever in verse 15 we're saying the head is the elder and honorable man, when it's saying honorable,
Yeah.
probably not. That's like that just means like the leader, not like that these are good leaders. Per se. It's just like the top of society to the false prophet, which is the bottom of society.
The ones that should be honorable men.
Right.
That's probably more what it means.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure about that. Okay.
All right. For every one of them is godless. I'm in the second part of verse 17, and an evildoer. So even the orphans and widows are godless and evildoers.
Yeah.
So that gives you some clue. And every mouth is speaking foolishness. In spite of all this, his anger is not turned away, and his hand is still stretched out.
There it is again.
So more is coming.
Yeah.
This actually really, I think this is neat, that it's showing us we have a gracious God. He can call off this punishment at any moment, but they don't get it. And he can't call it off because they're still so wicked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when we read these, are we seeing, is this temporal in a way? Like, are we supposed to be reading this as like this first thing kind of happened, like from, you know, in chapter 9, verses 8 through 12, that happened and God's hand came up again. And then this happened? Or do you think it's more just a progression of
wickedness?
It's more, right.
I'm thinking it's a little of both. And the reason I say that is because we know that in Israel's history, they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And even when God punished them, they didn't get it, and they just kept getting worse.
Yeah.
So I actually think it's a little of both.
A little of both, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, okay.
18?
Yeah. For wickedness burns like a fire, it consumes briars and thorns. Now, that's a phrase you're going to see often also in the book of Isaiah. Do you remember we saw it in the
Vineyard?
Exactly.
Vineyard, right?
He takes away the fence, or the rock fence,
and
and it
those
becomes
come back
briars
in.
and thorns.
Right.
Later on, we're going to see that God will burn up the briars and thorns. So what it's actually saying that, briars and thorns are weeds.
Yeah.
So it's basically saying that the vineyard is going to become a wasteland.
Yeah.
And basically that's what happens here. He's basically burning them up. So I guess what that's saying is he's punishing them, because that's what's going on here.
Yeah.
For the wickedness burns like fire. Well, he didn't burn them, but what he did is he brought on pressure and nations and stuff like that to punish them.
Right.
Yeah. All right. Even sets the thickets and the forests aflame, and they roll upward in a column of smoke. But the fear of the Lord of hosts, the land is burned up, or by the fury of the Lord of hosts, the land is burned up. And the people are like fuel for fire. No man spares his brother. Now, this was interesting. Look what they say. They slice off what is on their right hand, but still they're hungry. They eat what is on the left, so they're not satisfied. Each one of them eats the flesh of his own arm. Ephraim, or Manasseh devours Ephraim, Ephraim Manasseh, and together they are against Judah. So basically, first of all, we got civil war going on. Actually, it's civil war almost all over. So the northern kingdom is fighting against the southern kingdom, and it looks like often when they can't get enough food, that's basically a curse from God. So they're doing all they can to get as much food as they can, and still they're hungry. Well, that's because God's punishing them.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's so Manasseh devours Ephraim, and Ephraim Manasseh. Together they are against Judah. Now remember, we do know the northern kingdom ganged up on Judah at that time in the Syro-Ephraimite War.
Yeah.
So that makes sense. Then in spite of all this, his anger is not turned away. His hand is still stretched out.
There's more coming.
There's more coming. And look at this next one. Okay, so chapter 10 is, woe to those who enact evil statutes, those who constantly record unjust decisions, so as to deprive the needy of justice and rob the poor of my people of their rights, so that the widows may be their spoil and that they may plunder the orphans. Dude, that's like about the lowest you can get. You know, what's a widow and orphan going to have that you got to steal from them?
Right.
You know,
right.
I mean, they can't be
It's
that
a step
rich.
beyond not. It's already evil to not take care of them.
Yeah.
Now
And
you're taking advantage of
Yeah.
them.
And I don't know if you saw this before, but when we were talking about the woes, they had stuff like that. The things of the poor are in your houses. Do you remember that phrase?
Right.
Yeah. So they're stealing their stuff, and they're not even trying to hide it. They're putting them in their houses.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Now, what will you do in the day of punishment, in the devastation which will come from afar? There's another hint that it's going to be a distant nation that's going to come. To whom will you flee for help? Where will you leave your wealth? Nothing remains but to crouch among the captives or fall among the slain. None of those are very good options, are they?
Yeah.
All right. In spite of all this, his anger is not turned away and his hand is still stretched out. And then remember, the next Woe Oracle is talking about Assyria.
Right. Right.
So does that make sense? Do you see how those Woe Oracles work? And I think the first one is the most helpful.
The uplifted hand oracles.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So and it's interesting. Actually, this last one, if you're not paying attention, you may assume that one is a Woe Oracle as well, because it has that kind of key thing with woe, right?
Yeah.
So what do you think defines this as an uplifted hand oracle? Because the end part is more, and because it's such a unique format.
Because you don't see it anywhere else. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. And I just think it fits the structure so well.
Well, and this Woe Oracle would not fit with this other one.
Yeah,
because that's all about Assyria. This first oracle, the first, let me be specific.
Yeah.
Chapter 10, verses 1 through 4, being the last uplifted hand oracle, fits in much more closely to the previous ones.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, I would even say that a uplifted hand oracle is a type of a woe oracle.
Oh, okay.
Right? Because woe oracle is talking about judgment on them and too bad for you kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because an uplifted hand oracle is the exact same kind of thing.
Something's coming. Yeah, because of your evil.
All right, now I think we're ready for the middle part.
I know, it's been so tough. We've read so many hard things, I think. Difficult in terms of just content, you know?
Yeah. Now, the good thing is we know that the Song of the Vineyard starts off with them really bad.
Yeah.
That the Song of Thanksgiving is them somehow, God turns them around.
Yeah.
So in the process here, we've got somehow God's going to do it.
Yeah.
I think chapters 6 through 9, or 9, 1 through 6 anyway, the first part of it, is how he's going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's why this Isaianic Memoir is so important. Now, a couple things. Most of it is in first person. I can show you.
That'd be a big switch, really.
Yeah, because almost none of the book's in first person until you get to later parts. But if you look at chapter 6, verse 1, in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord. So you can see first person there.
Yeah.
Then one of the seraphim flew to me in verse 6.
Yep.
Okay. Then
7, he touched my mouth.
Yeah, in verse 8, I heard the voice of the Lord. Mm-hmm. So you see that. Then you get to chapter 7, and look at now. It came about in the days of King Ahaz, the son of Jotham. So now it's going to be actually in third person. So it's chapter 7 is the only. Now let's look at 8. Take for yourself a large tablet and write on it in ordinary letters. Swift is the booty, speedy is the prey, and I will take to myself faithful witnesses. So I approach the prophetess. So you can see it goes back to first person.
Yep.
Now, and it goes all the way to chapter 9. Most of this one is God talking.
Yeah.
But if you look at verse 7, for a child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us. That's still first person. Now it's first person plural, but it's still first person.
Yeah.
Okay, so what's interesting is that chapter 7 is the only one in this whole Isaianic memoir that's not first person. And I'm thinking, do you remember we talked about Isaiah being a scribe?
Yeah.
And Second Chronicles told
Yeah.
us that?
Yeah.
I'm thinking that this was something, because remember, it says during the time of Uzziah. So my understanding is that maybe Isaiah wrote this down as part of the historical annals, and why repeat it? So now he can just put it right into here.
Yeah.
So that's what I think happened, is that he takes something that he's already written, and it's, so it's even though it's not in first person, he was the one that wrote it, so he can stick it in here, I think.
Yeah.
So I think that's what happened.
Yeah, that is pretty interesting.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
Okay. Now, chapter 6. Remember, I told you that the book is not in chronological order.
Yes.
So we've always, in fact, let's go to this next one here. See this? I've got Isaiah's call about 740, 739,
the
it's somewhere
earliest,
in there. But we know that chapter 1 was talking about 701 when Jerusalem is sticking up like a hut in a vineyard
in the field,
or a cucumber field or something. So we know that's like 701. So this is not in chronological order.
Yeah.
It sounds like what they're doing is they're shaping it by themes, and you kept seeing that theme. Israel is gonna, or Zion is gonna be restored.
Yeah.
A remnant is gonna be spared. There's gonna be judgment on the wicked. So you keep seeing that theme those themes over and over again.
Yeah.
And so you've got them in chapter 1, you've got them in 2 through 4, you've got them in 5 through 12 again. Only just each time they get more detailed and more detailed.
Yeah.
So it's kind of interesting, I think.
Yeah, it's not how we would probably think about a book like this.
And that's why I think it gets so hard to know what's going on here.
Yeah.
If you don't know the history, this book is really hard to understand.
Yeah. Yeah.
But this timeline, I think, will actually help you. So we're going to talk about, in chapter 6 is going to be his call and commission. So that's about 740.
Yeah.
Okay?
Early.
Yep. Then verses chapters 7 and 8 are going to be pretty much around the Syro-Ephraimite War, so about 733 to 732. Then in later, but right at the end of 7 and 8, it talks about Samaria being destroyed, and it even talks about Sennacherib's attack. So in 7 and 8, it goes all the way to there, because in one point in chapter 7 it says, and guess who's coming on you? Even the Assyrians. Well, the only time that happened was in 701. It comes on into Judah, and the only time that happened was 701.
Right. Yeah.
So I think knowing the history really helps you on this book.
Yeah. Yeah, this is a good thing, and we've looked at this a few times, but this is a good one to keep coming back to. I think, just to help place it in the timeline to kind of know where we are, because it's not easy. I mean, really skipping ahead, we're not in chapter 7 today, but it starts off with the days of Ahaz, the son of Jotham, son of Uzziah. That's just a little bit foreign to us, I think, to really have an idea of what periods we're talking about. So having a chart like this is very helpful to I think so, to kind of graphically represent it. Yeah. In chapter 6, we're going early. Isaiah's call. So do you think this is the earliest thing? This is the earliest thing in Isaiah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there may be things earlier, but you'd never know because a lot of them aren't dated.
Oh, okay.
Right? This one was actually pretty clear.
This is specific.
Yeah. And I don't know if you remember, but at the very beginning it said that it was this is a vision of Isaiah the son of Amos in the reigns of Uzziah was the first one. It sounds like the only thing that was in Uzziah's life is his death. He already died.
Yeah.
Because that's when Isaiah's called.
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting. All right. So in the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, and the train of his robe filling the temple. Now, first of all, do you know what a train is on
a... I think so.
Okay. What is it?
It's kind of like a cloth that extends down, right?
Like in a wedding gown.
That's what I thought. I didn't want to say that, though. I am married, and I'm pretty sure my wife had one of those. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to make sure, because otherwise, what's this talking about?
Yeah.
Now, so here's a picture of God sitting on his throne. It's in the same year that the real king, the king on earth, died.
Yeah.
So I think what it's getting at is, even though King Uzziah, the vice regent that God's called, is dead, he's still up
The
there.
real king.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is still doing his job. No changes. Nothing's happened. Don't worry about it.
In the train of his robe filling the temple, is that kind of like not just the bigness of God, but like the highness of God, maybe? Like this is kind of a sign of glory.
Now, I don't know when it says that the train of his robe filling the temple, I don't know if that's the heavenly temple or the earthly one, but wouldn't it be something if he's up in heaven in his temple and his train went all the way down and came into the earthly temple? I think that would make a lot of sense in the book too, because God is going to use Isaiah to bring his holiness, because remember it says, and his holiness fills the earth.
Yeah.
Well, he's going to bring his holiness down, and part of the way he's going to do that is use Isaiah to tell them how wicked they are so they know that God's holiness is different than them. So I think it's at least possible that's getting
that's
at
an interesting image, I think.
All right. Seraphim. Oh, no, seraphim, that word means burning ones. Yeah, because it actually comes from the word fire, to burn.
Well, that would make sense.
Yeah.
What we have coming up.
Yeah.
Soon.
Okay. So seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. So I'm assuming the 2 that are covering his face is so that they don't look on the holiness of God. So even a seraphim, an angel, that's all their job is to call out God's holiness, can't even look on God.
Looking.
Yeah. So that's that. And then 2, the 2 wings that are covering his feet, I'm sure that's for modesty purposes. So it probably just means not just his feet, but all the rest of the way down. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. And then with 2 he flies. Okay. And one called to another. So I know there's at least 2.
Yep.
I don't know how many seraphim there are, but there are at least 2.
Yeah.
Okay. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. So that would make a lot of sense if you had him sitting up in heaven and then his train coming all the way down to the earth, the earthly temple. It'd show the connection for them.
I see.
So maybe that's what's going on. I don't know.
Well, when we get fullness again, the earth is full, and the temple was full too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
there's our word, of course.
Yeah.
Holy.
Yeah.
Kadosh.
Yeah. Good. And the foundations of the threshold trembled at the voice of him who called out while the temple was filling with smoke. I remember that idea of a temple filling with smoke was, you could go all the way back to Solomon's temple, where when he dedicated it, remembering God's presence came into it. So that was it was seen in clouds.
Yeah.
So I think that's what's going on here. His presence is being displayed there. Okay. Then I said, "Woe is me, for I am ruined." I don't think that's a very good translation. It's the word dama, and it means I'm silenced. I think God's awe so caught a hold of Isaiah that he couldn't speak. Yeah. And I think that's what was going on. He was just silenced in God's presence I think it's in awe, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I'm a man of unclean lips and I live among a people of unclean lips. Now remember, Isaiah is probably the most godly person at that time, and he even realizes how unholy he is in the presence of a holy God. So it's helping you to see what it's like to see God's holiness.
Okay, and the idea of unclean lips.
Yeah.
Are we getting into speech?
Yeah.
What lips represent, kind of?
Yes, but I also think later on, do you remember, Seraphim comes out and touches his lips? Yeah. I think it's like in the New Testament when Jesus says to Peter that he wants to wash his feet, and he says, "Oh, don't just wash my feet, wash all of me." And he says, "Well, you're already clean. All you need to do is have your feet washed."
Yeah.
I think that's what's going on here. He's going to touch his lips, purify those so that he can be a messenger for God. And I'm assuming that means his whole body is cleansed. But I think
it's representative.
Yeah, the lips of what he's going to be using for God.
Well, and that could be an interesting connection then to the translation you had of the word for ruined, of being silenced, maybe,
Yeah, I think so.
Since he's being clean to basically speak, really, to prophesy, right?
Yeah. Because I'm a man of unclean lips, and I live among a people of unclean lips. For my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts. So that's why I think he's stunned. He's silenced because he's just seen God.
Yeah.
And now remember, Moses Deuteronomy or Numbers tells us that no one can see God and live.
Yeah.
So you've already been told that this is a vision. So I think that's what's going on here. Here's a vision of God that just changes Isaiah's life. Yeah. Okay. Then verse 6, then one of the seraphim flew to me with a burning coal in his hand, which he had taken from the altar with tongs. And he touched my mouth with it and said, behold, it has touched your lips, and your iniquity is taken away, and your sin is forgiven. Not very often do you see your sin is forgiven in the Old Testament.
I was about to ask you about that.
Yeah.
That's pretty interesting.
Yeah.
That's you don't see that very often.
See, usually you see your sin is covered. And I think I understand that to mean, I understand it to mean that, like, here's your sin, blood is then put over them so that that God doesn't look on your sin, that blood is there.
Yeah.
And so your sin is covered. That's usually what you see. But there's several times Jeremiah talks about your sins being forgiven and taken away. This one talks about your sins being forgiven.
Yeah.
So it's not very common, but it does occur.
Yeah.
The Jeremiah passage is talking about the new covenant, them being removed from you even.
Yeah.
So not just your sin is forgiven, now at the new covenant, they're taken away.
Yeah.
So that's kind of neat.
That is very neat.
Yeah.
And do you think on this one, this is more, how far can we take this, do you think? This is really specific to Isaiah?
Yeah, I think so. And I think he's getting at what he's talking about here is that he's now ready to be used by God.
Yeah.
Remember, he saw his unworthiness previous to this. Now God's going to say, your iniquity is taken away, so now you can be used of me.
Yeah.
Okay, then verse 8. Then I heard a voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? Now that's interesting. The us, the plural for the Godhead. That only occurs 3 places. One of them in Genesis. Actually, 2 of them in Genesis, and then this one.
What's the Genesis one? Is that over the waters, that thing?
Well, there's actually one after that where it says that he made and he created man and he in our
image,
our image,
or likeness.
Yeah. So I think it's that one too. I understand that to mean when it says. Who will go for us? The only thing that's been talked about in this context is the seraphim. So I think it's talking about the angels. So who will go for us? Meaning God could send angels, but he just as soon have somebody down there on earth that's actually working for him. So I think the who will go for us is that one. It's the angels. I don't think it's talking about the Godhead.
Yeah.
The Godhead had not been explained yet for them. So in their minds, there's a God up there, but they don't know that he's made of different parts.
Right.
So I think they understood that to mean who will go for us, meaning God and the angels who usually he sends to do his bidding.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So it is interesting. I don't see that very often.
Yeah.
All right. Now the next couple of verses are really interesting. Who will go for? Shall I send? Who will go for us? Then I said, "Here am I. Send me." So here's Isaiah, willing and able to go do it. Okay, and so he said, and so God said, "Go and tell this people, keep on listening, but do not perceive. Keep on looking, but do not understand. Render the hearts of this people insensitive, their ears dull, their eyes dim." Otherwise, they might see with their eyes, hear with their ears, and understand with their hearts, and return and be healed. First of all, do you see how it reverses everything?
Yeah.
So you had their hearts being insensitive, their ears dull, their eyes. Then
listening.
He's gonna reverse that. Okay. Now, what that makes it sound like is that God does not want Isaiah's message to do its job, to heal them. And in fact, I don't think that's exactly what it means. I think what it's getting at is that Isaiah will do his job. He'll tell them, and he'll tell them over and over again, but they're not going to listen. And I think what that's doing is that it's going to have an effect of hardening their hearts. When they didn't know God's message, then it couldn't really harden their hearts because they didn't know it.
Yeah.
Now they're going to easily go against God, and so it's going to harden and harden. So they're going to hear what Isaiah says, but they're not going to like it, and they certainly aren't going to do it.
Yeah.
So when it says, render the hearts of this people insensitive, it's by him telling God's message that's actually going to have that hardening effect to them.
Wow.
Yeah. It's sad but true, and that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
Isaiah did his job, and in actual fact, they could care less. They're not going to change.
Yeah.
So, okay. So I need to make sure that you understood that, because that's kind of a hard.
It's tricky. You read that, it kind of seems like, why are we even?
Yeah, why even send him?
Yeah.
But actually, there's an answer for that too. If God remember, God doesn't punish people until they know what God wants from them and they reject that.
Yeah.
So in actual fact, God has to send Isaiah, because even if they're going to reject it, he has to give them that opportunity. And I think that's what's going on here. He's sending Isaiah and Isaiah's going to do his job great, but the people are just going to reject it.
So in a way, this justifies the punishment.
It will.
Coming.
Yep. Because God's clearly, I don't have the passage right here, but there's actually a passage that talks about God not punishing them because he had not sent his prophets yet to tell them. Now he's done it, and now he can punish them.
Yeah.
So it's pretty clear.
And he'll display his mercy with the remnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, where they will actually obey and turn.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, now the next, because now look what, Isaiah gets it, because he sees, wait a minute, it sounds like what's going to happen is that as I tell him my message, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
And so he gets that. So he says, Lord, how long? So he even asks the question, well, so he must think that can't be the final word, because otherwise the nation will never turn back to God.
Yeah.
And so he says he must have an understanding that there must be some time that they turn around. And so he answers, so here's God's response. Until cities are devastated and without inhabitants, houses are without people, and the land is utterly desolate. The Lord has removed men far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. Now, let me just stop there. What's that sound like?
Well, like everyone's been taken away.
So exile, right?
Yeah, right.
So God's response to how long is it going to be is until all the people are taken to Babylon.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now remember, Northern Kingdom is going to be taken to Assyria, but that's the response. Until the people are taken away, they don't get it. They're not gonna repent.
Yeah.
Okay. Now remember, we've talked about this. When they do come back from Babylon, remember, it's a righteous remnant because they care more about coming to build the temple and stuff like that that means they have to give up all the stuff they've accumulated for the last 70 years almost.
And this would be like Nehemiah.
Yeah.
Ezra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Huh.
Okay, so I want to show you something, because the next verse is going to be really interesting.
Okay.
Okay? And historically, if you understand it, it'll make a lot of sense. Okay, so let's see if we can figure it out. Okay, yet there will be a 10th portion in it. So it sounds like there's going to be, I've got here, one destruction, and there's going to be a 10th left. How many tribes were in there in the north?
In the north, there were 10, right?
10, yeah. So the 10 tribes are taken away and go. So he says, and there's going to be a 10th portion left. That means Judah is the only tribe that's going to be left. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so there will be a 10th portion in it, and it will again be subject to burning. So I've got the second destruction, and I've got that as 586. So the first one is 722, when the northern kingdom is taken off into captivity. Then you've got the second destruction, when 586, when Judah is taken off. Okay? All right, and it will be subject to burning like a terebinth or oak, whose stump remains when it is felled. The holy seed is its stump. So he's basically saying, after you have two destructions, a remnant is going to come out, and it's going to be a holy remnant that he calls the holy seed.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And that's a percentage of a percentage.
Yeah, it sure sounds like it.
Like,
so you've got a 10th portion, and then so one tenth left, and then some are going to be brought from that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Wow.
Yeah, so you've got what looks like to me a pretty clear message. Okay, so how long is it going to be, God? Well, until people are taken off. And let me explain, there's going to be two parts that they're going to be taken off.
Yeah.
First, the Assyrians are going to take off a portion. Then the Babylon's going to take off a portion. And then what will come back is a remnant.
Yeah.
So he just gave them God's plan for the next, well, at least for the next 500 years in their mind, right?
Right.
Actually, it wasn't quite that long because Isaiah is happening about 700s, right?
Okay.
So let's say if he's saying in 700s, he's giving the plan for the next 200 years.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So they're going to come back in 539.
Yeah.
Or 538, really.
Yeah.
So for about the next 150 years, you're going to have destruction and stuff like that. They're going to be taken away. There's going to be very few inhabitants in the land, and then a remnant will come back.
And I mean, at this point, because they're just talking about events, Isaiah wouldn't necessarily know.
I don't think so.
But it's past his life.
Yeah.
Like Yeah.
Now he'll know what he said here,
Yeah,
right? So
right.
there's going to be two destructions, and then there's going to be a holy seed that's left after that. How long that's going to take? I think he has any idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Isn't that neat? So what we So what we just done is we went through two sections of our Palistrophe. Remember the week before we talked about two sections.
Yep.
We talked about the songs.
Yeah,
and
the
then
very
woe
ends.
and the woe oracles.
Yep.
Now we've talked about the uplifted hand oracles.
Further in,
And we just talked about his call and
the
commission.
beginning of the center of the Palistrophe. Yeah.
So it sounds like to me he's done a really good job of setting the parameters up for him.
Yeah.
In fact, you got that when he asked the question, how long is it going to be? Because he doesn't think that could be the final word for Israel. And God tells him, well, here's my plan.
Yeah.
So I think that's neat. God's graciously letting Isaiah know how long it's going to take. Well, he won't know exactly how long, but he does know it's going to be some time off because the people are going to be taken out of the land.
And this really defines what Isaiah says, the whole book of Isaiah, really, right?
And now, especially when you get to the second part, right? Because they're now, from 40 on, is basically them coming back, and it's talking about that remnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I mean, that's, my favorite book in the Old Testament is Jonah.
Oh, yeah. You said that.
He's so opposite. Mm-hmm. Like everything is so opposite. It seems like Isaiah is a good prophet.
Yeah.
And Jonah is like the worst, But he's also really successful. God uses him in spite of everything,
Yeah.
But it's interesting here that it's like Isaiah is going to be doing this. What did we say? 60 years, possibly, prophesying, as a prophet. Yeah. And he may not know how far this is going to go, but it's past his life.
Yeah.
This message, his message is going to continue, and it's going to be a hardening message until finally.
Sad, but true.
Yeah.
And even Isaiah caught that, didn't he? He said, well, how long then?
Yeah. Yeah.
So he gets it. It's going to be a long, hard road.
Yeah.
And I think it's interesting what you said. Jonah is like the worst prophet. Isaiah's one of the best, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
He does his job well, and they look at him, but just don't listen. I assume that's a good message for us today, right? Isaiah was obedient. He was doing his job, and the people just could care less.
Yeah.
And so there's going to be days when we're going to feel that same way.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good sermon point, it's more important to be obedient and successful. Those are not always the same.
Yeah.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That got us through chapter 6.
Yep.
We're in the center of the Palistrophe.
Yeah.
You've told me before the podcast started, you've got some really good stuff to go over in chapter 7.
Yeah, it'll take us at least an hour to talk through it. It's
that's good.
Yeah.
We'll get into the complex part then.
Yeah.
And we can save that for our next episode.
Okay.
And then we'll get into, what else do we have left to do? We need to do chapter 8.
One thing, just to give you a little preview,
Yeah.
7 and 8 are covering about the same time period, but in 7, chapter 8 looks like it's even closer because it says by the time this child, and I think it's a different child, but by the time this child can say mommy and daddy or avi and ami, and that usually a child can say that about in a year.
Yeah.
Okay, but in chapter 7, it looks like it's a little time away, a little further away.
Okay.
So you've got both talking about the Syro-Ephraimite war and the ramifications of what that's going to do to the nation. And in fact, it goes beyond that, because both 7 and 8 go not only from the Syro-Ephraimite war, but all the way to 701. And I'll show you where it does that so you can see.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then maybe good homework.
Yeah.
Homework for next episode would be maybe read 7 and 8, because they are kind of close.
Yep.
We'll only go over 7 next week, but it'd be good to read both.
Yeah. Because then when we get to it'll make a lot of sense. Because you've already done some of the
some of the lifting in 7.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think another good thing is if you can go online and look on what's called the Syro-Ephraimite War. That would be actually really helpful, because it'll tell you. It will more likely it'll show you a picture of what happens, and so then when I talk about it, it'll make more sense. And I have a picture of Syria and Israel and stuff like that. But if you've already read it, that would probably really even help more.
That's good. That's helpful. Maps are always helpful.
Yeah.
It's always great to get an understanding. I like maps at scale of this area too.
Yeah.
Because all these people were living a lot closer than
That's right.
I like to imagine normally. Well, that's good homework.
Yep.
Chapter 7, chapter 8. Read about the Syro-Ephraimite war.
Yep.
And get ready, because we'll be getting into it again next time. So again, I just want to say thank you. We do this every time, but thank you to our listeners. Thank you, Dr. Wegner.
Yeah.
And be sure you join us next episode as we continue to study Isaiah.